Welcome to the GEMLabs podcast. Today, I'm speaking with my friend and colleague Jörn Erbguth. Jörn is a consultant on blockchain and data protection. He takes a multidisciplinary approach to new technology. He holds a PhD from the University of Geneva in social sciences and information systems. Jörn lectures at the Geneva School of Diplomacy, the University of Lucerne. He has been invited to the European Commission and the German Bundestag to discuss blockchain, data protection, and information security. We are both on the board of the Geneva GEMLabs. In this podcast, we're talking about AI governance, the recently adopted EU AI Act, and some of its implications. Today, we are talking with Jörn Erbguth. Before getting into the theme of today, could you please tell us when and how you came to join GEMLabs?
I came to Geneva GEMLabs 5 years ago. Renate invited me. She is co-founder of Geneva GEMLabs, and we organized a conference on blockchain and how innovation can be made sustainable and how to cope with innovation, because innovation is a huge challenge. And I think with my background in law and in computer science, I feel like at the crossroad of what this topic requires. It requires a deep understanding in technology and how regulation work and can work. And therefore, I was happy to join, and we did a lot of projects together. And now we are discussing AI together in the context of the European AI Act and other regulation and how to deal with it. The UN is also preparing guidelines on AI in the Global Digital Compact. And so we see regulation coming up regarding AI on many fronts.
Well, when did you join the board of GEMLabs?
Around 2020. I'm in part taking care of the finances as well, but of course we have different activities and we share those activities.
You were able to receive some sponsorship funds for a project you run with other board members. One you mentioned, Renate Günther, and the other one is Marianne Schörling. What can you tell us about this project and how you came to receive this sponsorship fund?
This was a great project sponsored by Micro Pioneer Fund, and they sponsored it for sustainable innovation. We did 3 cycles of sustainable innovation, and this is basically what we need. We need to innovate. We need to innovate in a sustainable way. And of course, we need this innovation coming from a diverse group of people. We don't want innovation coming only from one specific group of people. So it is important to have all kind of people involved when talking about innovation. And this is what we did in these innovation cycles. Have a broad group. Then, of course, you need the experts. So we organized experts coming to those groups that wanted to innovate. They use technologies like design thinking, collective intelligence, agile development, and we supported them with a lot of facilitators. And this is also where you supported this approach, that you facilitated and you organized a group of facilitators to support this process, because facilitation is also a very important part of innovation. Particularly when you have diverse groups, they don't speak the same language. So you need to connect and you need to be able to talk to each other. And this is also one of the important learnings that people get from taking part in this kind of innovation. You learn to talk to different people. You learn to talk to people that you're not used to talk to. And you learn to understand why they think differently. They have a different education, they have a different background, and they come up with different ideas, and bringing this together really is a benefit for all, for the participants and for the result.
Thank you. Let's now move on to the topic of today's podcast, which is AI governance. Specifically, what we're going to talk, or more or less specifically, because there are other topics also that are interesting, but recently on the 23rd of March, the EU has enacted the EU Act, and that is what we're going to be focusing a little bit more on in this podcast. So the EU AI Act and recent large language models like ChatGPT are both sparking conversations about the future of AI. What different angles should be considered for these challenges?
There are so many angles. So for example, often AI is just part of a system. So it is not threatening, but the problem is that it can be wrong. So for example, facial recognition is AI and can be used for all kinds of purposes. We use it with our smartphones to open the smartphone. It can be used to surveillance purposes. It can be used for good and bad purposes. It can be used as a passport control stand, or it can be used for many different purposes. And the AI itself, it is just the recognition of a person. And this is nothing frightening in itself. So it can be wrong with a certain percentage. It is right in 99 point, I don't know the exact numbers, but it is right in, of course, in most situations, but it can be wrong in some rare instances. And this can cause a problem. And it can be a problem that it is right because you don't want to have mass surveillance. So this case, the technology behaves as it should, but it is used in a way that we don't like as a society. So we have those two sides. We have the AI going wrong when it makes an error and mistakes somebody for somebody else. And we have the situation that the AI is working perfectly, but we don't think it should not work or should not be used in this way. And then there is those frightening sci-fi stories, AI taking over, and I seeing that AI is so good, humans are making so many errors. So in order to protect humans, we just put them in a zoo. And this idea of AI trying to save the world by putting us in a zoo. And this is, of course, some kind of frightening imagination that is far from being realistic today. But of course, the question is, well, can it be realistic tomorrow? Can it happen tomorrow? And these questions have been put up 70 years ago. When the first computers came up, people, philosophers, sci-fi authors, they thought about these topics. So this is not new, but now it's, of course, closer. It's getting closer. We don't know exactly how long it will take until we will be there, but it's getting closer. And these ideas are completely different from the idea that AI can be used for purposes that we don't like. And as a society, we say we don't want this to happen. And the second question is, AI is not perfect. It is much less perfect than normal computers. This means that we have to cope with a different type of error. So we have a system that does not behave as it should.
Mm-hmm. We will come back maybe to the dystopian aspect you were evoking, and also to the errors that are called by some hallucinations and that can have surprising effects. Let's maybe focus on the EU AI Act. What do you expect to happen when this AI Act comes into force in a couple of months?
Nothing. Of course, something will happen. People will worry about it. There will be a lot of publications around being put up. But actually, the EU has a nice way of differentiating between an act coming into force and an act starting to be applied. And the AI Act will come into force, I think, 28 days after it has been published. But it will start to apply the first parts will start to apply 6 months later, and the last parts will start to apply 36 months later, and some in between. So it will take some time, and this, of course, is time needed to prepare for it, because it's a complex regulation. And now authors, legal scholars will publish books, commentaries on it, not knowing how it will be interpreted, just having the law, knowing how it was discussed, and then trying to give some kind of advice what you need to do to be compliant.
I was under the impression that some of it will come into effect at the end of the session, this year's session, end of May.
No, the first part will come into, well, this is how the EU puts it. It is in effect 20 days after it has been published. But it will take at least 6 more months until the first part of it is applied.
So we have time to see many things happening and changes implemented as well.
It means a lot of things have to be constructed. We will have to install national authorities. On the EU level, we have new authorities. We need to establish standards. So the AI Act is far from being finished. The part regarding LLMs has been added quite recently. And it includes a lot of delegation of power.
Maybe before we get into detail what this AI Act contains, maybe we can take a step back and look at what is understood by governance, because that is what it's about.
Yeah, but
so
let me,
yes,
perhaps,
okay.
So the AI Act is far from being finished. And it's natural that it's far from being finished, because new technologies come up all the time. LLMs have not been the focus until recently. So how to deal with it? And the approach the AI Act takes is to give a lot of power, to delegate a lot of power to the EU Commission to create delegated acts. And of course, this is needed to be flexible and to react fast. But of course, there's also a risk that the EU Commission can then enact delegated acts without having to involve Parliament. So this is also a risk, a democratic risk, to giving too much power to the executive. And also it's needed because we want to regulate, but we don't really know what we are regulating because it's not there yet.
Let's look at what it means, what the word governance means when related to AI. So how would you define AI governance, and what role in AI governance do you see in the EU AI Act? Where do you see the key challenges?
The word governance has so many different definitions. So governance can be seen as regulation, as applying regulation. It can be seen much broader, including standards. It can be seen in the blockchain context. It can be seen as decentralized governance, where a group of people in democratic or kind of democratic process decide on things, discuss things. So the whole democratic decision process can be called governance. So we have quite some broad and meaning of governance in some different aspects. So when you look at governance as a society, the question is, how do we define the rules for AI? So, of course, we have a democracy. We vote for our representatives. The parliament is voting on laws. We have standards that will be designed by standards organizations. We have authorities that will then control how these laws are being applied, how these laws being complied to. So we have a lot of different angles on governance. And when you look into a company, of course, then governance might be the compliance with the law, but also how you deal with it internally. Who is deciding? What is the decision-making process in a company? Who decides? Who has to ask whom? So governance is a word that you can use for many things, and it doesn't have a clear, unique meaning. And of course, when you look at the AI Act, I would say the AI Act is AI governance. And it also says how this should be done regarding an AI system. So what steps need to be taken if you want to bring such a system to the market, if you want to develop it, if you want to bring it to the market, if you want to use it for specific use cases.
So you were talking about the key aspect of that governance, which is regulation. And it might be interesting to look at how the EU AI Act approaches AI regulation and what are the main focus points.
The problem with technology regulation are threefold. First, you want to have innovation. So you could just say, we don't want new things, then things are easy, but you want to have innovation. So you want to even foster innovation. On the other hand, you want to regulate things that innovation doesn't go wrong. So you need to know what can go wrong and what are the measures needed to prevent things from going wrong. In an environment where you don't know the technology, you don't know which things can go wrong. And what often happens is that regulation then results in a lot of bureaucracy. So if you don't know, you ask people to write documents, to document, to have procedures, to have all kind of ways to try to control it. And sometimes it works. Sometimes it does not really work and the risks are somewhere else. And in every case, it uses a lot of resources. But it's our way to approach problems. We make regulation that people need to document, to justify why they are doing things the way they are doing. And this, of course, increases bureaucracy, because this is just what bureaucracy means. And the EU has created a lot of new technology acts. So we have created a wave of regulation for technology, for data. We have the Data Act. It starts with the GDPR, but we have the Data Governance Act. We have so many new acts from the EU now, and this will create a lot of bureaucracy, or has created and will create more bureaucracy. Of course, we try to use this bureaucracy to achieve a good goal, but sometimes I'm not sure if it's the best approach.
So I would imagine that one of the reasons that we need regulation is to curtail risks. And there's a need for risk mitigation when we talk about technology. How does this act approaches risk mitigation?
So the idea is to differentiate, and this makes a lot of sense. Of course, you have AI systems that are not dangerous at all. And you have high-risk systems, and you have systems that you don't want at all. And so the AI Act comes with a classification of systems. You have systems which will be banned. You have systems that are considered high risk, and you have systems that are neither and can be used with low impact. And of course, this is also needed because when defining AI, the AI Act is using a very broad definition. So almost everything a computer does can be considered AI. Not everything, but a lot of applications, a lot of existing applications. And the AI Act also wanted to not stop everything. So they gave a leeway to existing applications. So if you have new applications, you are confronted with a big burden. If you have existing use cases, you don't have to go through all of it just because AI Act has been enacted.
When we talk about risks, there is also the way the responsibility of managing that risk is dispatched between different entities. Because if you produce something and someone is misusing it, is it your responsibility, or does it fall on the shoulders of the user? So how is this responsibility issue being considered by the Act?
The Act defines different roles and attributes different responsibility. And of course, for example, take a system that is supporting judges, for example. Then there is somebody who builds the systems, then there is the court or the government that is deciding to use it, and then there is a judge who actually uses it and has a responsibility, of course, to be aware of certain problems and to mitigate these problems if they might occur. And the AI Act gives each role responsibilities. So it's not as with the GDPR, where the vendor of a system does not have any responsibility regarding GDPR. So they can sell you a system that cannot be used GDPR compliant. They have no issue with that. And only the user of the system, the company that uses this system, has the issue of compliance. And this is different for the AI Act. So the vendor has some responsibility as well.
When the different groups that you're talking about confronted to something that is illegal, who should be involved in order to decide who bears the burden of the legal responsibility? Who will make the decision? Is it just the judge, or is there something that should be built into the governance mechanism?
We have new regulatory authorities on a national level, on the EU level. They can issue orders, but of course, they can be reviewed by a court. So it's the same way it works with data protection. You have data protection authorities that can issue all kind of injunctions and can also issue penalties. And then you have courts that can review it and see if it has been justified.
So until we relinquish our lives entirely to the machines who takes decisions, there's the human control aspect. We humans remain in control. Where does the AI Act focus on human control, and how far does that reach?
The AI Act has a lot of steps that are needed for high-risk systems to be able to run, so to start using such a high-risk system, but also includes obligations when this is being running. So you have to watch how this system works.
Is it mentioned?
Yes, sure. You have a lot of obligations. So you have to control if this system runs away into a direction that is not desired. And if a certain kind of problems arise. So if it's not like having a self-driving car and having a driving school, and it goes through driving school and takes final exam, and then it goes out and nobody takes care anymore. But it's like you have to constantly monitor if this system is behaving right. So they thought about these things quite a lot. And of course, this creates a lot of duties, this creates a lot of bureaucracy. But of course, we need to watch those systems to see if they behave or not.
So far in the history of technology, almost everything we have created, we could reverse engineer to see how they function. So the question of transparency is always a very important one, to understand how a system works. Now, with tools like ChatGPT or Google's Gemini and most other LLMs, well, we see the emergence of European-based, quite powerful LLM as well. We seem to lack that transparency in many aspects of their work. How will this act change that?
Well, we have different kinds of transparency. Some people think that transparency is just to explain in very general terms how it works. And this kind of transparency is there. But of course, it doesn't explain why a specific system is taking a specific decision. And you have transparency requirements that you have to, particularly for LLMs, you have to document what kind of training data you have used, but you don't have to document every single data, but you just have to explain what kind of data you used. And with LLMs and with machine learning in general, even if you have the exact same data, the exact same training data, the resulting LLM is not the same, because learning requires random. Without random, it doesn't work. So you have a random start of a system, you train it, and then the resulting system is always a little bit different and can run into different issues later on. So this kind of transparency you will never have with an LLM. But there's an approach that particularly OpenAI is using that provides still quite a bit more transparency. So the LLM that we use right now with a one-phase approach means that it's like a gut feeling. And so you have question and you present just first answer. When we train people, we train them not to act like this. We train them, of course, you have a gut feeling, but when you know a profession, you have learned a procedure. How do you answer a certain request? So the procedure means, for example, in the law, you have a specific procedure to follow to answer a question. You can't just say yes or no. Of course you can, but if legal reasoning requires you to follow this procedure. And this is actually what OpenAI is currently doing. They identify a specific procedure how to answer a question, and then they follow this procedure. And the procedure will then consist of different steps, and these steps have local results. So you can see the result of every step, and it becomes a lot more transparent. Of course, every step itself is still black box. You don't know why the step has given a specific answer. But it has the advantage that you can specifically retrain certain steps if they don't provide the results you want them to provide. Also, LLMs are good for some things, and they are pretty bad for other things, like humans. Humans are pretty bad in calculations. So if you want to multiply 2-3 digit numbers, there are few people that can do it just like this. And this is a quite simple answer. The amount of microchips you need for multiplying two numbers is very low. And those huge systems, they cannot do it like humans. So if you identify that you have to multiply 2 numbers, what do you do as a human? You use a calculator. Mm-hmm. And that's the exact same thing OpenAI teaches LLMs to do. You use a calculator, you write a small Python program that will be executed instead of just giving the answer without really taking care of the reason. The other thing is that LLMs are pretty bad in memory. We've seen a lot of hallucination, and this is because they are bad in memorizing, like humans. We get so much data every day. We learn with this data, but we can't remember the data. Sometimes we can, but most of the data is forgotten. And sometimes we think we can remember something, but it wasn't actually different like this, but it was different.
We also hallucinate.
Exactly. So what do we do when we hallucinate? When we are not sure how to answer? We use Google. We use Bing. So we use a search engine. We look something up. When I studied law, they told me never apply the law without looking in the text.
That is the best case scenario. Some people just make the answers up because they are convinced that they know and they remember.
Exactly, like ChatGPT. Finding out when to consult a search engine, when to consult other documents is a very important step in providing an answer. And ChatGPT is learning this. And if you have this kind of structured approach, it means that the answer is much more transparent without really giving the last bit of transparency why it has decided this way. Then it depended on step 3, where something went into a different direction, but still you don't know why step 3 was working this way. But it's like if humans give a reply, give a reasoning, and in the detail they don't give too much reasoning anymore. There's an end to the detail at some point. And the same thing can happen with AI. So it can give some more reasoning without really being transparent to the last bit.
Yes, we are seeing the emergence of plugins that are connected onto AI. Wolfram Alpha has become a plugin of ChatGPT for scientific and specific science issues. That takes me to a question that might be a curveball question, because it's difficult to have a conversation around this topic without thinking about intellectual property. And is there going to be a change in the way we appreciate intellectual property under the influence of LLMs, other emerging AI technology?
There's a difference. There's going to be a difference in how we evaluate creativity. Because with things like ChatGPT, we now have systems that can be creative. Before, creativity was a domain only humans could do. And now we have those systems that can be creative. And then we have to see how to deal with it. Concerning intellectual property, those systems are learning from existing intellectual property. And humans learn a lot humans learn with existing intellectual property. So if you want to learn anything, you read a book, you watch a video, whatever, you imitate what others have done before. That is how we learn. And this is free because we are an information society and we need this to be free. If learning, imitating would not be free anymore, it's the end of information society. It's the end of the human quest for going even further with every generation, using the knowledge that exists to discover new things. And this is really the core of our information society. And of course, now we have a difference that before it was only humans being creative on the basis of existing things, adopting a style of a painter and then painting in a similar but maybe different way, or applying it to new topics, whatever. And this,
it's a source of inspiration.
Yes, sure, it's a source of inspiration. And with copyright, it was a clear statement. Copyright does not protect ideas. Copyright protects expression. And this, of course, was because copying was easy. Imitating some expression or adopting an idea was something you needed to put in quite some work. So it is not an easy process to imitate a painting, and imitate a style of a painter. It requires work. And of course, when we now have systems that can do that without putting in work, this, of course, creates new questions. If you can imitate a picture just on a click, what does it mean regarding the original creator, and regarding, of course, how we value creativity? And this is, of course, the risk for a whole domain of creativity workers. What kind of job will they do in the future? Will they use AI? How will they use AI? What will their remaining role be? So we have a lot of copywriters, a lot of people who drafted things in the past, who might be out of work in the future. And with systems becoming better and better, this might even be more difficult, that we have even higher level creativity being replaced.
Yeah, I think it's time that we look at some of the dangers and see how defining and exhaustively detailing those specific dangers of AI is challenging. There appears to be, however, a consensus around two categories. How does the Act define what constitutes unacceptable risk?
It's just a list of systems that are declared unacceptable.
Maybe before you answer, is there a consensus of what is being defined as unacceptable?
Of course, with the AI Act coming into force, there is a consensus.
That's the European consensus, but is that a global consensus?
That's the legislative consensus. And actually, it is not really very general. It's rather certain use cases. I can read to you what kind of systems are prohibited. So, prohibited AI systems. Deploying subliminal, manipulative, or deceptive techniques to distort behavior and impair informed decision-making, causing significant harm.
That's the unacceptable risk.
Yeah. Exploiting vulnerabilities related to age, disability, or socioeconomic circumstances to distort behavior, causing significant harm. Biometric categorization systems inferring sensitive attributes, race, political opinions, trade union membership, religious or philosophical beliefs, sex life, or sexual orientation. Except labeling or filtering of lawfully acquired biometric datasets, or when law enforcement categorizes biometric data. Social scoring, or assessing the risk of an individual committing criminal offenses. Compiling facial recognition databases by untargeted scraping of facial images from the internet or CCTV footage.
This is an interesting one because there is someone who's been doing this for a while now, or already. Someone decided to just scrape the internet for facial recognition, selling that data to intelligence agency. So how will that be acted upon?
We have to see. Of course, people have been doing this. Those databases exist, and those databases have been illegal on the basis of GDPR in Europe anyway. There have been statements by data protection authorities, so it's not new that they are illegal. But of course, I heard about a tourist that lived for a long time in Germany under a wrong name, and that she has been discovered, and it was talked that facial recognition helped to discover her.
Yes, that was quite recent, right? About a few weeks ago.
So do we want this technique to be used? Who should be able to use it? Should law enforcement be able to use it? And actually, concerning this facial recognition, they exempted law enforcement from this prohibition. So it doesn't mean that it's allowed, but it's not forbidden by the AI Act.
Okay, so we are not preserved from a potential arrival of a dystopian future like the one described in 1984. So there are two types of these unacceptable risks, and there is also high risk. That's the second category. High risks, I suppose they are quite broad and wide. How is the limit made between high risk and unacceptable risk? Can high risk suddenly become unacceptable? Where is the line drawn? Who makes the decision?
So it is quite difficult to say what should be high risk, what should be prohibited. And actually, in the AI Act, it says the Commission is empowered to adopt delegated acts to amend Annex 3 by adding or modifying use cases of high-risk AI systems where both of the following conditions are fulfilled, etc. So they are able to, of course, change the definition. they want to be flexible. If they see something arising, that was not high risk, they want to be able to now define it as high risk.
Okay. There are a lot of concerns, obviously, that are being expressed around how AI can become malicious. And there are different fields where already today AI can be problematic. Let's look at one domain in particular, gene editing. So today, if you want, you can buy yourself a kit and do gene editing at home. It will cost you under $200, under 200 Swiss francs, under 200 euros. Even you can buy kits for around 100. And what with the help of AI you can achieve can be potentially catastrophic. And never in the history of humanity where a single individual with the possibility of killing millions just with doing a single action. So this is something that could become problematic. So in light of this, some people are suggesting that we have to think about ways to contain procedures. How could this work?
It might work, but the AI Act is not helping. So when you look at the scope, this regulation, for example, does not apply for systems exclusively for military defense or national security purposes. So the really problematic use cases are exempted.
That takes us to things that can worry us. We think that AI will be assisting us in every part of our lives. And it might mean that we will live in a panopticon or an Orwellian dystopic society where everything we say or do is constantly under scrutiny. So how will the notion of protection of privacy change?
This is a good question. We will have AI companions that will assist us with everything we do. And of course, these companions are quite useful. They will provide us with an abstract, they will remind us, they can answer emails automatically, they can do a lot of things. They can be quite useful. But of course, they will know everything about us. They could imitate us if they want. They could also misguide us in a certain way or in a good way. It's like a government that is helping us to do things, but it is also controlling us not to do the bad things. And actually, do we want the AI system to be a companion that is pushing us to do the right thing? Or do we want AI systems that is helping us to do the wrong things? And it's a fine line. And of course, we don't want AI systems to help us doing wrong things. But of course, we don't want to be patronized to be not able to do what we want anymore. And freedom also means that we can do things that might not be the best for everybody. It has limits. We have criminal law, etc. But will this change? Will it still be possible to be nasty if we want? Or will we be all good because AI systems will watch out? And if we have a tendency to be a little bit nasty, they will just hit our pawns, to hit our fingers and say, you should not do that.
But surely we're not going to have an AI companion that fits, one AI companion that fits all. So there'll be the AI companion that we will all have will adapt and evolve to answer our specific idiosyncrasies. We are all different and we want to improve our behavior a certain way. So this companion will steer us a certain way to help with that. But financial consideration will also impact the quality of the AI, and the more means you have or the more intelligence you have will enable you to have an AI that shields you from protection from others or the oversight of what you're doing? Or how do you see that working?
Well, I don't have knowledge about the future. I can also only guess, but it will be interesting. There are stakeholders involved that want to influence us. It's the government. They want us to become better human beings. If they are good governments, maybe. There might be governments that just want us to be less critical with the government, and so to behave in their way. There are companies, of course, they want to use it. They can influence us in our behavior to buy certain things. There will be different systems, and of course, if there's no free lunch, if you have a free system, somebody else pays, and they pay because they have an advantage. It could be that such AI system will manipulate us into buying certain things.
They already do.
The AI systems?
Those that are used by Google, by Facebook, by others in a way, because they monitor our behaviors and can target ads and they can determine when our brain is more available to receive a certain ad. Through our activity, they know what we like, what we don't like, what we're interested in at any given time. So they can already do that.
The question of personalized ads is certainly a highly debated issue. Regarding GDPR, it's a GDPR issue because it requires providers to create profiles for everybody. If you want to have a targeted ad, you have to have a profile that can tell you which is the ad that suits best your commercial purpose. So this is already being highly debated, and we see decisions by the data protection authorities. There has been a recent publication by the EDPB, by the European Data Protection Board, that basically reduced the possibility to use targeted ads quite a bit. So if this has to be completely voluntary. So if you have any kind of advantage by accepting those targeted ads, they considered it not possible anymore. So they restrict this more and more, and this might be actually a point where this becomes unacceptable regarding AI. But there is nothing that will not influence us. And actually, when you look at AI regulation in China, when you look at the Global Digital Compact by the UN, you see that they want to influence people. Of course, they want people to become better human beings and not just buy certain stuff. But isn't this the same? For example, if you want people to eat less meat, it means that they should buy different stuff. It's the exact same thing as a company that tries to make them buy different stuff. So it is not so much different. And if you think you want to use it to turn people into better people or to influence the behavior of people, then you have this issue on the table, and it will happen. And even if you say we don't want to influence people, but we just want to ban negative influencing, but we accept good influencing, then you have the influencing anyway.
Yes, and it's difficult to determine who determines what's positive or negative influence. We're drifting a little bit away into very interesting fields because it brings up into question the notion of information on us, data points that help all these companies target ads, and it also can be connected to intellectual property. Who owns really those data points? Who is the owner of that? We produce them. They tell a lot of things about us. They could help us improve, but so far they're being used to get money out of us, not to improve us. I think this is a conversation maybe that we should have another occasion, and maybe focus on something that you mentioned about democracies, the different objectives on how different governments use the information or apply the idea of AI governments. So maybe let's just look briefly, or in any length that you feel appropriate, on what the cultural differences in the regulation approaches of AI, how in different parts of the world that they are considered.
When you look at the US, they have a lot of regulatory activity regarding public organizations doing something like governments, governmental organizations. If some administration uses AI, it is more regulated than private enterprises using AI, because the public institution, the administration, has other duties of neutrality, for example. So we have different approaches there. When governments use AI, it can be considered more dangerous than if private companies use AI, or is it the other way around? So you have different perspectives. Who is the enemy when you talk to people? Some people will say, GAFAM, Google, Amazon, Facebook, etc., they are the enemy. All the evil comes from them. We must regulate them to death so that they will not have those big profits anymore, and we want freedom, and we only have freedom if we can regulate them very strictly. Or we have the other point of view, that governments the enemy, because governments will always abuse power if they have it. On the other hand, governments have a democratic legitimacy. They should do something, but not always, of course, not in all countries. But even in democratic countries, we have checks and balances, and we don't trust governments. It would be foolish to trust governments. Never trust a government. Control a government. We have courts that control a government. And so we have the notion that we need checks and balances for governments because we need to control them. And of course, private companies, we need to control them as well. And data protection authorities, for example, they control private companies. But it's a matter of maybe cultural or political point of view. Where do you locate the danger? Is it rather private companies and you want the government to have a stronger role in regulating them? Or do you see more risk with governments that can abuse the power that AI will give them?
Yeah, those are very important questions. I think we could go on for hours on this topic, but maybe to conclude, we talked about briefly the aspects of ethics that are built into the law. And I think it would be appropriate to conclude on this, because it's also an important consideration as far as I'm concerned, and as far as I hear many people are concerned. And those ethical considerations might not be the same depending on where you live. It is impacted by cultural issues. So how should they be implemented into law? And how can we approach this in a way of considering ethics from a global perspective?
Usually the legislation process is the way we implement ethics into law. So we have all kind of groups in society that can influence the legislative process, and so that ideally all the aesthetic considerations are being met, and we have a law that is actually enforcing what we think is good from an ethical point of view. With internet governance, we have the issue that we have a global internet. And to apply local laws to a global medium is a bit problematic. And we have seen large groups in some countries, for example, Germany, and said everything that is illegal should be locally in Germany should be illegal on the internet. Of course, this risks of fragmenting the internet. And of course, this notion is much more strict in China, for example. And they have the Chinese firewall to shield China from influences abroad. We can see it in Russia as well, with a lesser extent. So well, if we want to have a functioning internet, we have to have kind of a common standard, a common way for at least most of the things. We might not agree on ethics worldwide, but who defines ethics for the world? We need at least to have some kind of common and minimum dominator. Of course, we have human rights, we have all kinds of declarations which express this kind of common consensus. And with the Digital Global Compact, it's the next step to find a consensus on digital topics worldwide. And when you look at internet governance, was for a long time was a multi-stakeholder approach. When the internet came up, there was a decision, I think a quite wise decision, not to put it in the hands of the old telecoms that were slow in reacting and kind of not really fostering innovation. Rather than putting it to the ITU, that the ITU can regulate it as they do frequencies for telecom standards, etc., it was put into a new approach, the multi-stakeholder governance approach. And it worked quite well because it was a small community. And the small community created standards that are not officially standards, but that work as standards. And it worked well and it grew a lot, but now everybody is using it. And then governments come in again and say, we want to control and regulate it. And so this kind of multi-stakeholder governance is going down, is losing importance, and we have governance from the conventional actors, governments, of the UN. We have the same process as we have for other topics now on internet governance as well, as this includes AI governance. And of course, it's an issue. Will we be satisfied with the results? That is a compromise by many countries where the majority are not democracies. Do we have the right involvement of all actors of civil society into this new standard for internet governance, which includes AI governance? So there's a risk that this kind of global digital compact will fall behind standards in freedom of speech, for example. And this might be too restrictive. And this is, of course, a risk when we try to have a common standard, that we will lose part of the freedom that the multi-stakeholder approach achieved.
So there are a lot of open questions yet. We'll have probably many other conversations around this topic. I think we've covered the idea of getting an idea of what governance is understood in the context of AI.
Maybe to add one further thing, of course, all this regulation has an impact on innovation. And the EU was quite aware that this is causing trouble for innovation. So they have created two approaches that might actually help innovation. One approach is the sandbox. So if you want to develop a system, and want to try how it works, what the risks are, etc. And you can use it in a controlled, protected environment,
Isolated.
and see how it works. And then you can make different decisions, whether you want to allow it, whether you want to adopt a different regulation, whether you want to change the system because you have seen that there are certain risks involved, etc. And so this is included, the sandbox approach. So this is a sandbox approach means that it's controlled. It's not like a beta test where everybody can take part. But they have this kind of beta test environment as well. So they have measures in support of innovation, and these are the regulatory sandboxes where you can try to find out. For example, you have a system that would infringe, would not be compliant, but you think it's a very good approach. You can say, let's try it in a sandbox and find out whether we can manage the risks, and then we can have the consequences in adopting new legislation or whatever, or new delegated acts. And the other thing is we have testing under real world condition, which is like beta tests. And this is also introduced by the AI Act. Also, they learned quite a bit from the blockchain. They have also an observatory and forum with experts joining and giving advice. And so they created quite a lot of these things that can help technology to be better understood and regulation to better fit the real challenges. So they do quite a lot for this kind of innovation support as well. But this doesn't change, of course, that they introduce a lot of bureaucracy as well.
So it's important for innovation, and we can only hope that it will have a positive impact on perpetuating the very important role innovation plays in bringing new things and improving our lives. We can only hope that we don't find ourselves in a situation where things like escape like from a biology level 4 labs that are super contained, but accidents happen.
So let's be concrete. What kind of risks are involved there? So if you have a facial recognition and application that goes that produces errors, etc., it can falsely recognize people, but this is all it can do. If you have a self-driving car, of course, it could kill people, but the intelligence to decide I want to go out and kill specific people, I don't think this is going to happen from these kind of systems. But of course, you could use LLMs to connect to the internet and to act as a human in a specific way, to develop software that is doing specific things in helping you to do all kind of scams. So if you want to distribute malware, you need to create trust that people click on the link. And this part of creating this trust, I think AI can support this quite a bit. You have all the things with creating deep fakes. Of course, this will be an issue as well, that we don't know anymore what is real and what is not real. So we will have issues in this as they create things that will create problems. But the thing that maybe in AI will rule the world because they will attack all the instances and will take over control, etc. I don't see this happening soon. I don't see this as the most relevant risk. I think the most relevant risk is that humans will use those systems for bad things, or that that AI systems just produce too many errors and humans are not aware that this kind of error happens, and then they will not mitigate these issues.
We have to conclude on this.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for all this insight.
Thank you for taking the time, and it was a pleasure talking to you.